So the next item on the agenda is an update on the incident involving the loss of control of a CNSC sealed source as outlined CMD 15M23, 15M23.1, and 15M23.1A. And I understand that Dr. Thompson will make a presentation. Over to you.
Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président, membres de la Commission. Je m'appelle André Régimbal. Je suis le directeur général de la Direction de la réglementation des substances nucléaires. Je voudrais vous présenter mes collègues. Tout d'abord, Mme Patty Thompson, directrice générale de la Direction de l'évaluation et de la protection environnementale et radiologique, ainsi que le personnel de nos directions respectives, en commençant par la direction de Mme Thompson, Ms. Kaiser Francis, Acting Director of the Environmental Compliance and Laboratory Services. From the Directorate of Nuclear Substance Regulation, Mr. Peter Fundrick, Director of the Nuclear Substance and Radiation Device Licensing Division, Mr. Henry Rabsky, Director of the Operations Inspection Division. There are other CNSC staff available to answer questions as appropriate. I will turn it over now to Dr. Thompson to introduce the CMD and make the presentation.
Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président, Madame et Messieurs les commissaires. Mon nom est Patty Thompson. Je suis la directrice générale responsable du laboratoire et du permis consolidé de la CCSN pour l'utilisation de substances nucléaires. We are presenting you with an update on the verbal report of November 5th, 2014 regarding the loss of control of a seal source. The seal source had been recovered the previous day, which was November 4th, 2014, and we reported that there was no impact on public health or the environment. Today, we will provide you with a brief overview of the CNSC laboratory, a description of the lost source event, along with the corrective actions that have been put in place since this event. To begin, I'd like to provide you with an overview of the CNSC laboratory. We are currently located on Limebank Road in Ottawa, which is on the west side of the airport. We lease the space in the building from Natural Resources Canada, who occupies the other half of the building. The CNSC laboratory was moved to this location in 2010, and after extensive renovations, the staff moved to that location at the end of the year. There are currently 10 staff at the lab, including the chief analyst, who was appointed in 2014 in April, and the chief analyst is also the supervisor of the laboratory. The modernized laboratory substantially enhances the CNSC's capability to verify licensee compliance programs such as radiation protection, environmental protection, safeguards, and emergency preparedness. A more rigorous radiation detection calibration program means that CNSC inspectors are better equipped. Ultimately, the new laboratory means enhanced protection for nuclear energy workers, the public, and the environment. The laboratory has two main service lines providing calibration services for CNSC inspectors and staff, and medical services for CNSC staff as well and inspectors. The laboratory is currently in the process of obtaining accreditation to the ISO 17025 for the gamma calibration services, with accreditation of the rest of the calibration services and then analytical services to follow. The laboratory also participates in proficiency testing exercises provided by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the National Research Council of Canada, and other service providers. The laboratory has achieved passing results for both radiological and non-radiological analysis and continuously scored as one of the top performing labs. This provides confidence in the laboratory results. To provide these services, the laboratory has two CNSC licenses, a Consolidated Uses of Nuclear Substances license and a Class II facility license for the gamma irradiator facility. I'd like to note at this time that we are here today discussing an event that occurred under the Consolidated Uses license. Regulation of the licenses is done by the Directorate of Nuclear Substances Regulation, and that directorate is in the Regulatory Operations Branch, and the CNSC laboratory resides in the Technical Support Branch. Featured in this slide is Laboratory Senior Analyst Dr. Pujing Pan, and he's placing a calibration sample into a high-resolution gamma spectroscopy detector. This slide provides a visual representation of the services that the laboratory provides to the CNSC. As noted on the previous slide, the two main service lines are sample analysis and calibration services. Under sample analysis, the laboratory provides the results of the analysis of the samples that are taken for the Independent Environmental Monitoring Program, as well as those taken during inspections at licensee facilities by CNSC inspectors. The CNSC laboratory also participates in the nuclear forensics capability development under the Canadian Safety and Security Program. The CNSC laboratory provides the calibration services for all the radiation instrumentation used by CNSC staff, including inspectors at nuclear power plants and those in regional offices. Both the sample analysis and radiation instrumentation calibration services require the use of radioactive substances and devices. The laboratory also has an inventory of seal sources that are used both at the lab and loaned out to internal permit holders for use outside of the laboratory. The inventory of seal sources is quite large. There are currently over 500 seal sources at the laboratory. In order to use nuclear substances or radiation devices at the CNSC lab or elsewhere by CNSC staff, the CNSC has a consolidated uses license issued by the NSR. Under this license, there is a robust radiation safety program. This program has its own internal permit system to ensure the use of radioactive substances is done in a safe and controlled manner. There are currently 2 internal permit holders under the Consolidated Uses License, the laboratory itself and the Emergency Management Programs Division, or EMPD, who borrow sources for training of first responders within Canada for radiological emergencies. The event being discussed today occurred as a result of one of these off-site training sessions delivered by EMPD staff. EMPD was issued their internal permit in August 2013 after the internal permit system was established. Since receiving their internal permit, EMPD has submitted 9 requests for sources for training purposes. Each training activity usually involves the use of more than one source. Those 9 requests resulted in 140 sources borrowed from the laboratory. Each radioactive source request required a review by the radiation safety officer to ensure compliance with the license and the authorized user's permit and associated documentation and procedures, which include shipping, receiving, verification, and storage. The source inventory database also had to be updated at each step of this process. The event related to the source missing was initially reported verbally to the Commission on November 5, 2014. The previous day, on November 4, 2014, an EMPD staff member opened a package in Vancouver as he was preparing to deliver a training exercise. Upon realizing that the package was empty, the individual immediately contacted the CNSC lab administrator to review the source database to determine where the source had last been used. The laboratory determined that the source was previously loaned to EMPD on August 19, 2014, and it was listed as having been returned to the lab on August 26, 2014. Nonetheless, the EMPD staff member contacted his division to determine where the source might have been used during the August time period and advised the EMPD director of the missing source. After having determined that the source had been used at the Canadian Police College in Ottawa, the EMPD staff member immediately contacted one of the instructors at the college and requested that they verify using a survey meter if a source had been left behind. The Canadian Police College instructor phoned back within 5 minutes and confirmed that the source was where it was left, and that was at the base of a lamppost and shielded with bricks. A team of CNSC staff consisting of a radiation protection specialist, a laboratory staff member, and 2 emergency program officers were sent immediately to the college to retrieve the source. This was approximately 3 hours after the discovery that the source was not in the package in Vancouver. Once the situation was under control, the NSR was notified of the event. In communication with the NSR, we understand that a notification should have been made at the time of the discovery that the source was missing, not once the source had been retrieved. In reconstructing the event timelines, it is clear that by not following procedures and keeping proper records, both internal permit holders contributed to the length of time the source was missing. An empty package was returned to the lab by an EMPD staff, and the source was documented by the radiation safety officer as having been returned. A partial seal source inventory was completed in September, which did not identify that a source was missing. Furthermore, the packaging and transport requirements should have identified that the package was empty prior to it being shipped and received in Vancouver. Section 2.2 of the CMD M23.1 provides the event chronology in detail. The following two slides illustrate the location of the source between August 19 and November 4, 2014. So this map was provided by the Canadian Police College. It is located in Ottawa on the Rockcliffe Parkway near the Aviation Museum. The star on the top right corner of the map indicates where the seal source remained. The next slide has pictures of this area. So the picture on the left of the slide shows a lamppost and the lamppost and the parking area where the seal source was recovered. On the right side of the slide is a close-up picture to show the shielding that had been placed around the source when it was used for training. This area is not accessible to the public. Rather, it is the Canadian Police College and RCMP parking facilities. It is adjacent to the RCMP musical ride facilities that is also not accessible to the public. Through discussions with the Canadian Police College, it was determined that their staff may have accessed the trucks parked near the lamppost from time to time. It was also determined that the person involved in the lawn maintenance would have likely been the most exposed individual. CNSC staff took a number of radiation dose rate measurements at various locations with the seal source in the configuration in which it was found, with the assumptions of a once-a-week lawn maintenance for a period of 10 weeks and an estimated time of 2 minutes at 1 meter from the source. The most exposed person potentially received an estimated dose of 100 microsievert, or 1/10 of the public dose limit of 1 millisievert. It was determined, therefore, that there was no impact to public health or the environment due to the source remaining in this location for in excess of 2 months. In response to this event, as a licensee, I took actions immediately and throughout the last few months. The day after the event, I suspended the internal permit for EMPD. This meant that all sources would remain at the laboratory, and any sources that were on loan at the time were shipped back to the laboratory. I put in place an event review team, independent of the lab staff. The independent review team, or ERT, consisted of a senior regulatory program officer from the Directorate of Power Reactor Regulation and a radiation protection specialist. They were supported by a staff member from the Office of the Audit and Ethics of the CNSC to ensure integrity of the review process. The ERT was tasked with determining the causes of the event and proposing recommendations for corrective actions. The ERT also prepared the 21-day report that was submitted to the NSR in accordance with the regulations. On December 4th, after the 21-day report submission, I submitted a corrective action plan to the NSR. Since this time, the NSR conducted an inspection, performed desktop reviews, and met with those responsible for the license, including myself. A preliminary report was issued by the NSR, and after review of the preliminary report, all operations at the lab were suspended. I determined that before operations could continue, a thorough review of all the procedures was required, along with addressing other items identified from both the corrective action plan and the inspection findings. The corrective actions will be outlined in the next few slides. So the next 4 slides discuss the corrective actions which were required to address the causes of the event. All these corrective actions have been completed. This slide identifies corrective actions related to the findings that the implementation of procedures and training needs improvement. In order to address this, a thorough revision of the Radiation Safety Manual was completed. All of the procedures have been reviewed, updated where needed, and a validation session has taken place for each procedure to ensure that the procedures as written will provide the necessary instructions to staff and will produce the necessary documentation and records. This revision was done in consultation with the CNSC Management System Division, as well as with the Human and Organizational Performance Division. An example of a change is to enhance the seal source control. The form used by laboratory staff when shipping and receiving seal sources has been changed. The radioactive source loan form now requires 2 authorized users, usually an assistant radiation safety officer and an authorized user, to sign off on the form. This will help ensure that all steps are properly performed. Another example is that all tasks related to radiation safety that are performed at the laboratory require review and sign-off by an assistant radiation safety officer. Once the new procedures were in place, all of the electronic and print versions of the old procedures were removed from filing systems and from workplaces to ensure that the older versions were no longer be used. A full-day training session was held at the end of March with all CNSC staff who have roles and responsibilities under the Radiation Safety Manual, including myself, the directors of the divisions involved, all users of radioactive materials, and all administrators of databases. This training ensured that all staff are aware of their roles and responsibilities under the Radiation Safety Program. Training on all procedures was completed, usually one-on-one, through one-on-one training sessions. A training needs assessment was completed to ensure that each staff member who requires training receives the appropriate training. Finally, a training matrix to track all training records and refresher training dates was created to ensure that all staff and their managers can confirm that the appropriate training has taken place and can easily confirm when refresher training is required. The second set of corrective actions is in response to both the internal review team and the DNSR inspection team findings that accountability, roles, and responsibilities need to be clearer. In the previous slide, I provided information on the one-day training session that was held to confirm roles and responsibilities. Other corrective actions that have been completed relate to the roles of the radiation safety officer and the responsible managers for the internal permits. Before the event, the radiation safety officer position was performed by the supervisor of the lab, who is also the responsible manager for the internal permit and is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the lab. The position of the radiation safety officer has now been moved to Dr. Aslam Ibrahim, who is the radiation physics specialist at the lab and also the certified radiation safety officer for the Class II facility license. For all matters related to radiation safety, Dr. Ibrahim reports directly to Ms. Kaiser Francis, the acting director of the division, and Ms. Francis is also the signing authority for the license. The Radiation Safety Committee was created in 2013 to provide direction and support to the applicant authority in the development and implementation of an effective radiation safety program. The terms of reference of the Radiation Safety Committee are being revised to exclude the responsible managers from the committee. The Radiation Safety Committee membership is myself as chair, the director of the Environmental Compliance and Laboratory Services Division, the director of the Radiation Protection Division, the director of the Management Systems Division, and the Radiation Safety Officer. The frequency of meetings has been increased to provide enhanced oversight and support. The third set of corrective actions that have been completed relate to the enhancement of management oversight. The following changes have been made. The oversight role of the Radiation Safety Committee has been strengthened by increasing the frequency of meetings from quarterly to 8 meetings this year, and focusing on internal reviews and corrective actions. The responsible managers for each internal permit are now required to approve requests for seal sources and are required to perform their own internal review of operations under their permit within the first 6 months of issuance of the new permit and periodically thereafter. Before this change was made, the EMPD staff member requested the seal sources directly from the lab without an approval from their responsible manager. The internal review requirement will ensure that responsible managers have a documented review of operations under their permit, including ensuring that all required records are generated. The signing authority, which is Ms. Francis, is now the final approval stage for internal permits and seal source requests. Before this change was made, the Radiation Safety Officer was the final approval stage, which meant that the director was not involved in approving these items and might not become aware of them until an update from the Radiation Safety Officer was provided. I will also verify on a monthly basis that all persons utilizing nuclear substances under the CNSC license adhere to policies and procedures established under license. There will be a record kept of every monthly verification. This slide provides a graphical representation of some of the changes that I've just described. The responsible managers no longer sit on the Radiation Safety Committee, and the Radiation Safety Officer reports directly to the signing authority for radiation safety matters. This removes any potential conflict that may occur when the responsible manager for the laboratory sat on the Radiation Safety Committee and when the Radiation Safety Officer reported to the responsible manager for radiation safety issues. Another important radiation safety improvement involves the addition of Assistant Radiation Safety Officer position. 2 laboratory senior analysts, Dr. Nadare Saint-Amand and Dr. Pujing Pan, have been appointed to this position of Assistant Radiation Safety Officer and have been tasked with some of the day-to-day work of the Radiation Safety Officer was carrying out previously. This slide speaks to the corrective actions that are being implemented to address a recommendation by the NSR staff during the last inspection. Corrective actions relate to the inventory of seal sources that are stored at the laboratory. Some of these corrective actions have not yet been completed and are in progress. It should be noted that revision, validation, and training on the procedures related to seal source control and seal source inventory have been completed. As previously noted, significant management oversight has been added to the seal source control procedure. The seal source inventory procedure has been amended to allow the placement of a seal on packages containing more than one source. If the seal is in place during the next quarterly inventory, the authorized user is not required to open the package. This revision will allow for the quarterly inventory to be completed in a more timely manner and will aid in keeping radiation doses as low as reasonably achievable. The 2 other corrective actions that are in progress will result in a reduction in the inventory of sources at the laboratory, including a reduction in exempt material and historic artifacts. These improvements will also help in reducing the time it takes to complete the quarterly inventory with better use of resources on safety significant sources. Those are the sources that are within the CNSC license, and ensure that the amount of radioactive material that is stored at the CNSC laboratory is appropriate for the requirements of the CNSC staff. In other words, there's approximately 70% of the sources that are stored at the lab currently are no longer being used by CNSC staff. And so there's a plan to dispose of these sources at a CNSC licensed waste facility. In conclusion, the corrective actions that directly address the causes of the event have been completely implemented. The corrective actions to reduce the source inventory of radioactive sources and historic artifacts are underway. The updated procedures and radiation safety manual will be submitted to the NSR with a request for a license amendment. In terms of next steps, I have requested an independent evaluation of activities carried out under license to be completed by December 2015. The NSR will conduct a compliance evaluation within the next 6 months. The NSR will continue their annual updates to the Commission, and we will be available during those updates to respond to questions from the Commission. I will now pass the presentation back to Mr. Régimbald.
Merci. André Régimbald here speaking. So in conclusion, the Directorate of Nuclear Substance Regulation has completed its assessment of the corrective action plan submitted by the CNSC laboratory and is satisfied that all of the important action items that are programmatic in nature have been closed. We will continue our focused regulatory oversight of the laboratory operations regarding the use of nuclear substances to ensure that all of the corrective actions are implemented effectively. Therefore, the Directorate of Nuclear Substance Regulation is satisfied that the CNSC laboratory has taken and will take appropriate and sufficient measures to prevent the recurrence of this event. And we are satisfied that the CNSC laboratory will ensure the safe use of nuclear substances by other CNSC staff. CNSC staff does not plan to provide further updates to the Commission on this matter unless circumstances demanded in the future. As Dr. Thompson pointed out, we will continue to report on the safety performance of the laboratory annually through our regulatory oversight reports. This concludes the presentation, and we are available to answer questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you.